The skies of Korov X burned with lightning. Sulfur storms rolled across the broken wastes like angry gods, splitting the clouds with violet fire and toxic ash. From orbit, the planet looked like a dying star wrapped in a storm's embrace. From the surface, it was worse. And from the Varn Dominion's high observation deck aboard the cruiser Triumph Absolute, it was a spectacle of cruelty, a stage set for extinction. Inside the observation deck, Varn General Takar Volume leaned against the viewing pane with a smug, predatory sneer. "They requested autonomy," he said, his voice like cracked glass. "Let's see how autonomous they are without lungs." Behind him, various Dominion officers clicked their mandibles or pulsed light through their skin in amusement. The room buzzed with anticipation. Korov X was a Class 0 death world. By Dominion standard, it was uninhabitable, far below the survival threshold even for genetically adapted species. A world not fit for machines, let alone organic life. It was the perfect dumping ground. "Drop complete," a tech chirped from a side terminal. 17 pods made contact. Seismic spikes consistent with solid landings. And casualties? 3 confirmed DOAs. Others are functioning. The officer's appendages twitched in a way that betrayed discomfort. "Human vitals are stabilizing," Volume frowned. "That's impossible. The gravity alone should have pulped them." A moment of silence. "Shall I dispatch drones to confirm?" Vol turned slowly, talons clinking against the steel floor. "No," he said. "Let them rot. This isn't surveillance, it's cleanup." Across the galaxy, the humans had grown unruly. Since first contact, they'd clashed with nearly every major species. Not through war, but through persistence, endurance. Their biology was unpredictable. Their tactics unsophisticated, yet alarmingly effective. More than once, they'd embarrassed Dominion fleets with what amounted to scrap metal and swear words. A species of warm-blooded contradictions. So the Dominion made a decision. They labeled humans a contained threat. Disobedience would be punished not by extermination, which might invite reprisal, but with compliance exercises. A polite term for galactic exile. The worst of them, soldiers, engineers, specialists, were loaded onto drop pods and fired into Class 0 worlds. No fanfare, no extraction plan. And now they were on Korov X. Planetquake zone, toxic biome, thermal swings of 80 degrees. Predator-to-prey ratio absurd. As the Varn celebrated the humans' impending doom. 17 kilometers below, mud swallowed a steel hatch as it hissed open. Captain Elias Voss emerged into the storm with a breathing mask, eyes narrowed against the wind. Ash blew across his faceplate. The air was thick with ammonia and sulfur. Beneath his boots, the ground crunched like old bone. Around him, others emerged, some limping, others dragging crates. He tapped a COM. Ranger 1 to all units. Form shield perimeter and confirm heartbeat count. Inside his helmet, a voice came back, distorted by static. 16 standing. 3 gone on impact. 2 injured. No fatalities on recovery. Copy, Phase 1 operational. He looked up. The sky cracked open again, lightning dancing between clouds like the fingers of angry gods. He didn't flinch. "Command thought this would kill us," murmured Corporal Alina Rez, scanning the horizon. "They didn't realize Earth was worse in the 21st century." Elias didn't smile, but he didn't disagree either. He pulled up a small, flickering tablet and tapped into the pod logs. The forward recon units were already deploying sensor spikes and collecting soil samples. Not for scientific purposes, but tactical. The predators on this world moved fast. But they had patterns, territories, weaknesses, and humanity had learned long ago that anything with a brain could be killed. Back aboard the Triumph Absolute, Vol's confidence faltered. He stared at the new vitals coming in, humans thriving. Their oxygen was lower than ideal, but their red blood cells had spiked, heart rates had normalized, cortisol levels were oddly low. Calm, one screen showed a human dragging a wounded comrade through a field of acidic brambles, using a shredded uniform as a tourniquet. Another showed a trio constructing a makeshift air filtration unit from wreckage. One more, perhaps the most disturbing, captured a campfire, with humans laughing around it. Laughing, Volume whispered. They're enjoying themselves? The lead xenobiologist turned, clicking nervously. They appear stimulated by adversity. Challenge seems to improve their coordination, even morale. That's not evolution. That's madness. No, General, that's human nature. Vol waved a talon. Send drones, high-altitude surveillance. Full spectrum. I want to see how long their luck lasts. The drones launched. On the surface, Voss knelt beside a recon relay, scanning the static. He noticed the shadows first small. Flashes against the lightning. Drones. Watching. He activated his transmitter. Command to all squads. Eyes in the sky. Showtime. Across the wastes, humans scattered into pre-planned positions. Makeshift camouflage netting snapped into place. Passive jammers activated, flooding drone sensors with environmental noise. Decoy heat signatures popped on. The Dominion drones recorded nothing useful. Only heat blooms, static, and the distant sound of rhythmic pounding. A drumbeat. Vol narrowed his eyes at the audio feed. What is that noise? The tech swallowed hard. I believe it's music, General. Music? It's a war rhythm. Down on the surface, Corporal Rez grinned. Let them watch. Elias Voss stood tall on a crag overlooking the field, holding a battered Terran flag aloft. We were born on a Deathworld, he whispered. They just sent us home. The drones hovered like silent wraiths above the charred ridgelines of Koravix, their lenses flickering as they scanned the terrain for any sign of human activity. From orbit, they transmitted feeds full of noise, distortions, and static-laced footage, mostly of boiling skies, jagged rock formations, and motionless terrain. The few moments they captured of actual human movement were brief, puzzling, and unsettling. General Volume watched the footage with increasing agitation. Enhance this segment, he snapped, pointing at a freeze frame where 3 human figures darted into a ravine, 2 carrying supplies, 1 limping. The enhanced view brought no comfort. One of them had turned to look straight up at the drone, as if they had seen it. As if they'd known. General, the xenobiologist murmured, shifting nervously. The last atmospheric burst sweep detected multiple shortwave emissions from the surface. Crude, yes, but patterned. Some appear to be encrypted command chains. Volume didn't look away from the screen. You're saying they're coordinating. They're not just surviving, the biologist admitted. They single quotes communicating, strategizing. Another officer stepped forward, skin shifting to a cautionary shade of gray. Permission to deploy exterminator-class orbital strikes? A single sweep would render the region inhospitable even to them. Vol waved him off. Not yet. Let them show us their tricks. Then crush them all at once. He tried to believe his own words. But beneath his robes, one of his limbs twitched with unease. Below, in the bone-choked canyons of Koravix, Captain Elias Voss studied the terrain from a camouflaged overlook. The sky boiled overhead, green lightning crackling like the fury of old gods. Beneath his boots, the ground was scorched glass, broken occasionally by twisted metal or the husks of past expeditions. Alien skeletons, Dominion helmets. Charred. Flags of lesser species. All of them had been judged unworthy, but not humans. Voss adjusted his visor. Res report. The corporal's voice came back through the coms. Sector 3 is secured. Tripwire traps set along the ridge. Movement detected in the north gully, nothing larger than a Vorn pack. We scared them off. Good. Eyes. On the sky, they're watching us, but not seeing much. Elias allowed himself a thin smile. Let's keep it that way. From the southern ridge, Sergeant Kale reported in. Reactor pod is stabilized. Jury rigged enough power for the cum station, and the thermal met. Oh, and Lieutenant Sato says the flora here isn't entirely toxic. She made tea. Voss blinked. Is she drinking it? Already did. Said it was earthy. He shook his head. Smirking. Humans. Nearby, Alina Rez crouched beside a camouflaged motion sensor embedded in a rock. Her face was smeared with ash, sweat trickling down her brow as she studied the blinking lights. They're not sending anything bigger than drones, she said. They still think this is containment, not combat. Let them. Elias replied. What the Dominion didn't understand, what they never seemed to understand, was that humans had stopped waiting for rescue the moment they'd hit the surface. No one on Earth was coming. This wasn't exile. This was war. And unlike most species in the Dominion's bloated archives, humans didn't need clean air, soft beds, or hope to fight. They needed purpose. And a target. From the edges of the canyon, a distant howl rang out low, guttural, and unlike any known Karavian predator. Rez froze. That's new. Another voice came over the coms, sharp and panicked. Sector 4 reporting hostiles 5 to 10 unknowns, fast movers, low profile, quadrupeds repeat, engaging. Gunfire burst through the channel, followed by static. Elias activated the tactical display. Alpha and Bravo converge on Sector 4. Rez, you're with me. Let's see what this planet's really made of. By the time they reached Sector 4, the battle had already ended. Corpses littered the blackened dirt-long, sinewy beasts with crystalline fangs and translucent skin. They shimmered like liquid metal even in death. 2 human soldiers were down, one unconscious, one being treated for a torn shoulder, but the rest were fine. And what struck Elias most was that the humans hadn't just fought them off. They'd hunted them. Sergeant Kale was skinning one of the creatures. Muscle densities off the charts. Looks like armor plating under the dermis. Sato stood nearby, taking notes. If we can isolate the adrenaline compound in their bloodstream, we might be able to synthesize an edge for our own units. Rez whistled. They sent us to die, and were already writing field manuals. Above them, the drones hovered silently. Watching. Recording. Calculating. On the observation deck of the Triumph Absolute. The drone feeds relayed the aftermath of the skirmish. This. This is not consistent with Dominion projections, one of the tacticians whispered. Class 0 predators killed in coordinated defense. Minimal casualties. They improvised weapons. Created field medicine. And now they're processing alien corpses, the biologist muttered. They're adapting faster than any species we've cataloged. Val's mandibles clicked tightly. Impossible. But then the tech at the console froze. General, she said softly, we just intercepted a low-frequency message. Human origin, intended for us. Put it through. A voice echoed through the chamber, grainy but unmistakably human. Calm. Steady. You sent us to die. That was your first mistake. Silence fell. The Dominion officers stared at each other, rattled in a way they couldn't quite explain. Then the voice returned, colder. Your second mistake was letting us get comfortable. Val rose slowly from his seat. The room had grown very quiet. Something had changed. The humans weren't just surviving. They were planning. The Dominion's orbital sensors pinged with increasing urgency. Their delicate matrices flooded with noise from Korov X, static, pulse patterns, data anomalies. Dozens of them, emerging from different locations on the surface, seemingly random, yet eerily synchronized. General Volume stood rigid on the command deck of the Triumph Absolute, staring at a growing cluster of markers across the planet's night side. One after another, they blinked red. then amber, then dark. Those were recon beacons, a tactical officer said, uncertain. All of them. Disabled. Volume didn't blink. Disabled how? Simultaneous shutdowns. Not destroyed, turned off. Manually. By who? The officer swallowed. By humans. For a long moment, silence clung to the air like static. Vol turned slowly. They've taken control of Dominion hardware, sir. They've hijacked it. The general's tendrils twitched. Below, on the surface of Korov X, the humans had already begun their next move. Captain Elias Voss crouched inside the skeletal remains of a crashed Dominion survey ship, his gloved hands working through a tangled mess of alien circuitry. A faint, acrid light illuminated the narrow space, enough for him to see the delicate, insect-like control panels, most of which had been pried open and rewired with shocking precision. Standing behind him, Lieutenant Sato watched the readouts. With narrowed eyes, we've rerouted power from the Dominion's atmospheric probes to our thermal net. We now have eyes across a third of the northern hemisphere, Voss nodded. Can you use them to jam orbital feeds? Already working. On it. The encryption's sloppy, over-designed. Pretty, but predictable. Rez stepped in through the bulkhead, rifle slung across her back. Southeast team just brought in another salvage drone. Intact AI core. They're calling it Frank. Frank. Bit one of them. Voss didn't look up. Frank learns quickly. Sir, she said more seriously, we've had 4 more Predator encounters in the last hour. No human fatalities. Sato's cocktail seems to be boosting adrenal response. And reaction time. Voss let out a quiet breath. So we're harder, smarter, more informed. And now we have their sensors. He looked around the dim shell of the ship, then up through the fractured ceiling toward the sky beyond. We're not just surviving. Anymore, we're winning. Sato tilted her head. And we haven't even played our best card. Vol paced the deck, fury radiating from every motion. You told me they were primitive, crude, emotionally unstable, easily broken under environmental pressure. The biologist shrank slightly. That was based on all available data. Then your data was useless, Volume snapped. There. Fighting like a species born to war. Flourishing in the worst conditions we can offer. Not flourishing, the biologist corrected, evolving. The words settled across the command room like a cold fog. Vol hissed. Deploy the Iron Pulse. Full atmospheric sweep. I want all electronics on the surface disabled. If they're using our tech, we'll fry it. Below, Voss felt it before he saw it. A tremor in the dirt. A ripple through the magnetic field. Then a sudden snap. Half the displays in the Dominion wreck flickered and died. Outside, the air pulsed like a silent thunderclap. The sky darkened. Every device in the region went dark. EMP. Sato winced, shielding her eyes. Well, that answers that, Rez groaned. We just lost half our net, Frank's screaming in binary. But Voss wasn't panicking. He tapped a console next to him, dead. He reached into a sealed compartment behind a scorched panel and pulled out a smooth, unmarked black case. He popped it open. Inside were 3 cylindrical devices, each the size of a canister, matte black. Blinking with soft blue light. Backup AI cores? Rez asked, eyebrows raised. Voss nodded. Custom-made, human-engineered, no Dominion circuits, no Dominion signals. He held one up. EMP-resistant, self-learning, and very, very angry. Sato grinned. You've been holding out on us. I was hoping we wouldn't need them. He activated the first core. A second later, systems throughout the ship flared to life, stronger, faster, more efficient than before. The Dominion tech was replaced line by line with human code, written in brutalist formatting, optimized for wartime latency. An interface booted across every surviving display. It simply read, Operation Lazarus Online. Elsewhere across the wastelands, Similar canisters were being activated. Old Dominion relays repurposed, drone husks reanimated, hunter-killer protocols scrubbed, rewritten, and set loose. Above, the Dominion watched in horror as devices they'd once controlled came back online, but not in their language, in ours. "This can't be real," the tech whispered. "They're launching counter signals, disabling our uplinks, redirecting our own drones." Vol gripped the edge of the command console, his claws digging into the alloy. "This isn't rebellion. This is coordinated infiltration." The biologist's voice trembled. "General, these weren't primitive prisoners. They were a strike team." Vol's eyes burned. "You mean they wanted to be dropped here?" A pause. "No," the biologist said quietly. "They planned it. In the shadow of a shattered ridge, 2 Dominion drones turned mid-flight, reoriented, and began carving new paths not toward human positions, but toward Dominion outposts. Friendly tags overwritten. Firewalls bypassed. 1 opened fire. On Dominion personnel. VOL screamed, "Shut them down. Recall all surface units." "It's too late," the officer shouted back. "They've rewritten the command architecture." Volume watched helplessly as Koravix's surface turned into a theater of betrayal. Dominion machines spun against their makers. Human units advanced not in desperation, but in formation. Packs of predators trailed behind them like trained hounds. "They've turned the entire planet into a trap," the biologist whispered. Vol's voice dropped to a rasp. "We didn't contain them." "No," came the reply. "You delivered them." The fires of Koravix glowed brighter than its shattered moons. In Sector 9, Dominion forward forces screamed over comms as their own sentry bots turned on them, targeting friendlies with terrifying precision. The drone's targeting systems, once synced exclusively to Dominion neural tags, now flickered with human-coded overlays. Dominion troops died by the dozens, not from human weapons alone, but from their own machines. Their own pride, from the command bridge of the Triumph Absolute. General Volume leaned over the tactical display, watching in numb silence as entire swaths of surface forces were routed in under 30 minutes. "They've mapped our deployments," a junior strategist stammered, tapping at the interface. "They're springing coordinated traps using terrain, redirected drones, and local fauna. Entire patrols are vanishing in ambushes. Nothing we send survives more than an hour." "Deploy armor units," Volume hissed. "We did," the tactician replied. Vol's eyes narrowed. "And they're gone." Entire armor battalions, 8-legged gun platforms, hive tanks, atmospheric crawlers vanished, most without a single distress call. Where they had once rolled over lesser species with ease, they now bogged down in ravines, were lured into collapsing sinkholes, or targeted with makeshift explosive traps built from salvaged Dominion wrecks. Koravix had become a crucible, and the humans were mastering its every inch. Beneath the red haze of the sky, Captain Elias Voss stood over the shattered remains of a Dominion quadwalker, its legs splayed like a dead insect. Human engineers swarmed around it, prying off usable parts, stripping power cells and armor plates. Sergeant Kale slammed a crowbar into the chassis and yanked free a functioning cannon module. "Think we can mount this on the ridge?" Kale asked. "Won't just mount it," Rez said from beside him, grinning. "We'll build a nest around it, one they won't forget." Nearby, Sato walked beside a lumbering crawler they'd reprogrammed. It moved like an obedient hound, its weapon ports shut but ready, tracking her steps like a loyal beast. She scratched it behind what was probably its sensor array. "We'll call this one Muffin." "Muffin?" Kale blinked. "The 50-ton death crawler?" Sato nodded. "Well, yeah. Look at those adorable murder legs." Voss let the jokes pass. Let them breathe. He knew what it meant. Humor meant control. It meant they weren't just holding the line, they were winning. The longer they stayed, The better they adapted, their gear improved. Their strategies evolved. Even the planet itself, once hellish and hostile, had become a tool in their arsenal. Humans didn't just survive Deathworlds, they learned them. Over the last 2 days, they'd mapped geothermal vents and channeled them to power makeshift foundries. They used volcanic ash to create camo netting undetectable to infrared scans. They'd baited native predators and then tamed them. Semi-domesticated hunting beasts now flanked human squads, responding to scent markers and ultrasonic calls. Dominion elite units creatures, bred for war over centuries, faced ambushes from squads half their size, armed with reconditioned weapons and improvised explosives. The humans didn't fight cleanly. They fought effectively, and they never stopped moving. VOL watched the map as human control zones began bleeding out across the planet's surface like veins. They've hijacked 27% of our tactical grid, someone reported. It's spreading faster than we can isolate. Then isolate harder. Vol roared. No, General, the biologist said quietly. They want us to. They're hurting us. Hurting us? The biologist tapped the map, overlaying Dominion retreat paths. Every fallback position was exactly where the humans wanted them, toward resource-scarce zones, into predator-rich valleys, toward environmental hazards that the humans had already mitigated for themselves. They've read our doctrine, the biologist whispered, and now they're using it against. US Volume stared. This was supposed to be exile, a graveyard. The biologist didn't meet his eyes. You built this graveyard. They're just burying you in it. The worst part wasn't the tech. It wasn't the traps, the hacking, the reverse-engineered warbits, or the tamed monsters. It was the human mindset. They didn't fear the planet. They didn't rage against the pain. They welcomed it. Somewhere deep in the human condition was a spark the Dominion couldn't quantify, one that saw adversity not as a wall, but as a ladder, and they were climbing on the northern ridge of the Terminus Wastes. A group of humans had erected a signal tower using the bones of a fallen crawler and antenna shards taken from a disabled orbital relay. It shouldn't have worked, but it did. A tight beam signal had launched, brief and precise, cutting through the Dominion jamming web like a scalpel. It read, Fort Genesis operational, Stage 2 ready. Vol read the intercepted message and staggered back. They're establishing infrastructure, he muttered. They don't think they're marooned. The biologist turned, face grim. They don't. Below, Vol stood at the base of the tower, staring across a horizon choked with blood-colored clouds. Behind him, engineers fortified the perimeter. Weapons were calibrated, and hybrid drones patrolled overhead. Rez approached, her face smudged with soot. We just got the last seismic sensors online. If anything larger than a beetle moves within 20 clicks, we'll know. And the main charge? Voss asked. Buried. Armed. Laced with shock plasma. The next armor column that tries to push this way will find out exactly how much they taught us. Voss nodded. Rez hesitated. You think they'll send more? Or just nuke the site? He glanced up. They don't want to admit they lost. Then what do? We build. We wait. For what? He looked past the horizon, his eyes hard. For them to realize it's already too late. Far above, on the Triumph Absolute, alarms wailed. The humans had gained access to orbital telemetry. General Volume clutched the edge of the console as the reality set in. The humans weren't stranded. They were invading from below. The Triumph Absolute trembled. Not from enemy fire, no ships had breached orbit yet, but from within. The tension, the dread, the slow, dawning realization that the unthinkable had happened. They have orbital telemetry access, the sensor chief repeated, voice barely above a whisper. They've tapped into our uplink grid, every satellite, every atmospheric drone, even our internal communications protocols hacked. General Volume stared at the projection. Red warning sigils crawled across every Dominion interface, flickering. Like open wounds. One by one, Dominion strongholds on Korov Ix were being isolated. Cut off. Then silenced. "They've hijacked an entire surveillance net designed to monitor a war zone," murmured the biologist. "They turned it into a targeting matrix." Volume clenched his jaw. "This is still a backwater planet. We have orbital superiority. Call in orbital bombardment. Level everything." No response from targeting satellites. They've been spoofed. The bridge went cold. Down on the surface, Elias Voss watched the upper atmosphere through a cracked visor as a Dominion support cruiser passed overhead, its silhouette barely visible through the amber clouds. The ship made no move to attack. No strike came. It was blind, deaf. And now it was a target. "Transmit telemetry package," Voss ordered. Sato tapped a console. "Coordinates locked. Reaper Spike is online." On a mountaintop several kilometers away, a tall antenna array unfurled from a scavenged Dominion hull. The Reaper Spike, a human-built suborbital cannon. Crude by galactic standards. Designed from scratch, constructed from wreckage and repurposed mining gear. It had no AI, no tracking system. Just cold math, raw ingenuity, and a very, very big slug. Firing. The cannon roared. The shot punched through the upper atmosphere like a comet, invisible to Dominion sensors. Seconds later, the support cruiser above Korov Ix shuddered violently. Fire bloomed across its dorsal hull. The bridge of the Triumph Absolute descended into chaos. "We've lost contact with the Crexus Dawn. Multiple hull breaches deck 5 through 11. Vol turned, stunned. What hit them? "There are no other ships in orbit." "Not a ship," the officer said hollowly. "A railgun. Fired from the surface." Volume spun to the biologist. "They've built surface-to-orbit weaponry in under a week?" "No," the biologist replied. "They didn't build it. They brought it with them in pieces, hidden in their own drop pods. They planned this." The realization slammed into Vol like a blade. Operation Lazarus wasn't a response. It was a setup. The humans had expected exile, expected betrayal, and had prepared accordingly, not for survival, but for domination. Back on the surface, Voss stood beside the charred crater left behind by a Dominion grav tank. The trap had been elegant. False power signatures, baited terrain, thermite-lined decoys, and a lured-in drone fleet disabled mid-flight. Then, a combined charge that turned the ridge into a furnace. Now they had the debris, and the morale boost. Kale approached with a datapad. "We've deciphered more of the Dominion protocols. The fleet above is down to 3 major ships. Everything else is scrambling." "Evacuation?" Voss asked. "No, repositioning. They still think they can win this. But they're getting scared." "Good." Rez ran up, helmet off, face streaked with ash and victory. "You're gonna want to see this." She led them to the forward intel tent. Inside, the holomap showed new data overlay signals coming from the other side of Korov Ix, not Dominion signals. "Human ones. Another team?" Voss asked, startled. Sato nodded slowly. "Multiple. At least 6 confirmed Terran groups. They were dropped months ago, buried deep in no-return zones. Left for dead. But they're alive," Kale said. "And they've been listening." Rez grinned. "We just made contact. They're en route." All around the forward base, preparations halted. Soldiers looked up. For the first time, faces that had been hardened by survival lit up with something more than determination. Hope. From the far canyons and acidic lakes, survivors emerged. Human remnants once presumed lost mercs, black ops, ex-marines, planetary. Rangers, some missing limbs, others half feral but alive. And when they saw the banner over the new fortress, they saluted. Fort Genesis. They hadn't been abandoned. They'd been rallied. In orbit, Vol's personal chamber was dark save for a single screen. A live feed from one of the last surviving high-altitude drones. It captured a ridge on the Koravik surface. Human forces stood in formation, shoulder to shoulder. Behind them, flying on jury-rigged poles and scavenged metal, dozens of flags. Not Earth's, not a nation's. Each one bore the names of lost colonies, fallen ships, forgotten resistance groups, tributes to the broken, the banished, the betrayed. And above them all, in tattered glory, a simple white cloth with one phrase burned into it. You tried to erase US. Now we remember. The feed cut out. Volume didn't speak. Not at first. Then, quietly, to no one in particular, we triggered something ancient. Something buried in their blood. The biologist nodded. It's not technology, not numbers, it's belief. They're fighting for each other. Vol staggered back, realizing too late the scale of the mistake. The Dominion hadn't just created enemies. It had forged a legend. One that wouldn't stay buried, and it had awakened. Far below, the sky cracked with thunder. Not from the storm, but from hundreds of human voices shouting in unison raw, unfiltered defiance. The war wasn't beginning. It was ending. And humanity had already won the will to finish it. The skies above Korov Ix were on fire. Flashes of light streaked through the storm clouds, detonations from burning Dominion ships falling out of orbit like dying stars. The once untouchable fleet, a symbol of galactic dominance, now looked like fractured glass across the void. Debris rained down through the atmosphere in smoking arcs, hammering the mountains and slagging the plains. On the ridge above Fort Genesis, Captain Elias Voss stood motionless, the howling wind whipping his coat, the tattered Terran flag fluttering at his back. Around him, humans were preparing. No more skirmishes. No more ambushes. This was war. The last of the northern artillery is in place. Rez reported, her voice calm through the comms. EMP grenades are loaded. Rail support ready. Targets marked. Status on orbital? Voss S. Sato answered. From the comms tower. 2 Dominion ships left in stable orbit. One disabled, the other repositioning, probably to evac volume and command. They won't risk a full strike now. Not after we downed the Crexus Dawn. Kale chimed in from the ground. Perimeter. The survivors from the deep buried teams have been folded into our formations. They single quotes read. Ready. There was a pause. Then Sato added softly, so are we. Voss nodded, his jaw clenched. Then we begin. The signal went out. Across the canyon, down through the toxic valleys, and into the smoking plains, every human unit began to move. Predators, once feared, now marched alongside them like living war machines. Drones swept overhead, not Dominion, but reprogrammed hunters, painting targets in Dominion blue. The humans moved not as scattered survivors, but as an army. In the fortress above, the Reaper spike powered up for its final shot. Sato adjusted the targeting manually, old school. Her fingers danced over the controls, teeth gritted. Targeting lock acquired, Dominion evac ship, minimal escort. Maximum value. She pressed the firing command. From the mountain came a low, bone-rattling boom. The round punched through the clouds, and moments later, high above, the Dominion command ship erupted in a brilliant orange blossom. The scream of its failing reactors was silent in the vacuum, but its meaning echoed across every Dominion. Frequency. Command had fallen. General Volume watched it happen from the last functioning deck of the Triumph Absolute. He stood alone now, his officers gone, his crew either fled or dead. Static crackled across every monitor. His empire, his legacy, was dissolving around him. Below, humans advanced like phantoms through the ash. This wasn't exile, he whispered. It was an incursion. He turned toward the last escape pod, but paused as a new signal flickered on the screen. A live feed. Captain Elias Voss. He stood, Unarmored, dust-streaked, eyes hard. "You wanted to show the galaxy our weakness," Voss said, voice low. "But all you did was give us the perfect training ground." Val said nothing. "You exiled us, starved us, buried us. And you thought that would break us." Voss leaned closer to the feed. "We don't break." He ended the transmission. Below, the final Dominion stronghold Outpost Zero was under siege. Humans poured over the ridge, charging through gunfire, dragging portable shields, launching Javelin-style missiles powered by salvaged Dominion tech. The air was thick with smoke, plasma, and the thunder of explosions. Overhead, hacked Dominion turrets rotated and opened fire not on the humans, but on their former masters. Rez leapt onto the back of a Dominion crawler, jammed a pulse grenade into its hatch, and vaulted off as the machine exploded. She hit the ground hard, rolled, came up shooting. Beside her, Kale and 3 others cleared the gate with ruthless efficiency. Inside the outpost walls, panic reigned. Dominion soldiers screamed in confusion, shooting at shadows. Every system they tried to activate failed. Every fallback corridor collapsed in fire. The humans had taken control of the entire infrastructure and used it like a weapon. Voss and his team breached the central command chamber. Dominion commanders inside tried to negotiate, but the humans didn't respond. They were past words, past warnings. One of the alien officers raised a hand, trembling. "You single quotes monsters." Voss holstered his weapon. "No," he said. "We're human." Outside, a final drone feed caught the image of the Terran flag being raised above the blackened fortress. It wasn't pristine. It was scorched, torn, covered in blood. But it flew. The Triumph Absolute began to fall soon after. Its reactor destabilized by human codeworms inserted days earlier. As it spiraled down toward the atmosphere, Vol stood in the central chamber and closed his eyes. They hadn't lost a battle. They'd lost a war of assumptions. He'd had made the gravest of errors, mistaking mercy for weakness. By the time the Triumph Absolute broke apart over the planet it once ruled, it was already too late. Humanity had conquered a Class O Deathworld. And they had done it not in spite of the planet, but because of it. The last thing the galaxy saw from Koravix was a broadcast, pirated across every channel, a single message. "We are no longer the forgotten. We are no longer the underestimated. We are the survivors of Koravix. And we remember everything." Smoke still lingered in the skies of Koravix days after the last Dominion. Transmission fell silent. The winds carried the acrid scent of ash and ozone across the broken terrain. But beneath the burned soil, something had taken root. Not vegetation, not recovery. Something more enduring. Humanity. They had not just survived the Deathworld. They had claimed it. Atop the fortress once known as Outpost Zero, now renamed Fort Genesis, Captain Elias Voss stood at the edge of a platform overlooking the valley below. Where once there were skirmishes and craters, now there were watchtowers, bunkers, and communication arrays rising like steel trees. Dominion wreckage was piled high, some repurposed, some melted down for building material. What was left of there? Technology had been cannibalized to serve the very people it was meant to annihilate. A dozen human banners flapped in the sulfur wind. Not symbols of conquest, but of remembrance. "This doesn't feel like victory," Alina Rez murmured, stepping beside him. Her combat armor was scorched and patched, one arm in a sling. Voss didn't respond immediately. He watched a group of engineers string up new wiring along a defense post. Somewhere farther off, the howls of half-domesticated predators echoed as they were trained for sentry duty. "This wasn't a battle," he said finally. "It was an awakening." Rez exhaled, her breath fogging slightly inside her mask. "We built a civilization out of fire and poison. We turned hell into home. And the Dominion will remember that," Voss said. Rez looked at him. "You think they'll come back?" He nodded. They'll never admit it, but they're afraid of us now. We were never supposed to fight back, much less win. We didn't just make them bleed, we made them question themselves. She smiled, winced at the pain in her ribs. Then I hope they remember this place. Oh, they will, said a voice behind them. Sato stepped onto the platform, carrying a data tablet. Her eyes were sunken with exhaustion, but her expression was proud. Every major broadcast array in Dominion space is burning with one name now, Korov X. She handed the tablet to Vos. He scrolled through it. Reports from across the galaxy. Species once under Dominion Boothiels beginning to resist. Small uprisings, planetary rebellions, civil defiance. All triggered by a single absurd headline. Humans conquer Class 0 Deathworld. Sato folded her arms. We gave them a story, a spark. Kale joined them, grinning despite the bandages on his face. They thought we were mad, and maybe we are. Who else would laugh in acid storms, tame apex predators, and wire up alien tech like it's backyard junk? Rez raised her hand. Don't forget tea. Sato made Deathworld tea. They all laughed, tired and raw, but real. The kind of laughter that could only come after walking through the fire and coming out stronger. Farther down the ridge, a group of human children rescued from long-lost colonies or born in exile ran between the ruins, their laughter light and unburdened. The sound was alien here, beautiful. It wasn't just soldiers who had survived, it was a future. Later, a Dominion delegation shell-shocked, cautious, trembling approached Fort Genesis under a white flare of parley. Not to negotiate terms of surrender. Not to fight. To ask. What had made humans survive what no other species could. They were escorted through the scarred fortress, past hybrid weapons, packs of loyal beast hounds, and human warriors sharpening scavenged blades beside drone-repaired railguns. Every corner screamed a singular message: you did not break us. You made us. At the summit, they were brought before Vos. The leader of the delegation, a thin insectoid whose voice trembled under translation, asked, "How did you win?" Vos looked at them not with rage nor vengeance, but cold certainty. We didn't come here to win, we came here to endure. That's the part you never understood, the insectoid blinked. You welcomed pain? Vos shook his head. No, we outgrew it. The delegation left in silence, their view of humans permanently rewritten. Later that night, around the central bonfire of Fort Genesis, the survivors gathered. No longer fragmented teens or abandoned soldiers, now a people reborn. Engineers, medics, sharpshooters, scouts, scientists, orphans, families. As the flames danced, Vos stood before them and raised a hand. We were sent here to be forgotten, he began. They thought exile would make us fade, that this planet would erase us. The wind howled around them, as if daring him to stop. He didn't. They forgot one truth. You don't erase humanity. You forge it. A roar followed fists to the sky, voices unified, the sound echoing into the poisoned air like thunder. In the distance, another Dominion outpost burned. The last one. The war was over, but the message had only just begun. Centuries. Later, in a galactic museum orbiting a quiet star, a young alien child paused before a dusty exhibit. It was old, outdated, and surrounded by hushed legends. On the plaque were 3 simple words etched in ancient Terran script: Korov X, humanity's birthplace. Among the stars, the child turned to their parent. Is it true? They conquered a death world? The elder nodded solemnly. They didn't just conquer it, they changed everything. The galaxy feared death worlds until the humans made one into a home. After that, nothing was the same. The child read the words again. Slowly, reverently, you sent them to die, they whispered. And beside it, scrawled in faded ink, they brought life instead.